After spending 17 years behind bars, a man wrongly convicted of murder is finally free. When he was 20 years old, a jury convicted Obie Anthony of shooting a man to death in South Los Angeles.
The whole time, Anthony maintained his innocence. Now, as he approaches 40, he's a free man thanks to the help of some local law students. Anthony's legal team proved to a judge that there was never any physical evidence connecting him to this murder and that the prosecution's main witness lied on the stand. Well, tonight.
I'm a former prosecutor. It was my job to put people in prison every day. But I had a transformation because I've been teaching for 25 years and looking very critically at the criminal justice system. And I realized that we make mistakes, and we make tragic mistakes that affect people's lives. And one of the people affected by this was this gentleman, Obie Anthony. Obie was our very first client, a client we got simply because we reached out to see who we could help. And he had a case that involved a murder that took place back in 1994. He had been serving since age 19, 17 years in prison for a murder he did not do.
Actually was like, are you sure you got the right guy? Is that the right booking number? I mean, like, we need to check. And so he said, yeah, this is your booking number is these numbers here, right? And your name is Obie Anthony, right? I'm like, yeah. He said, oh yeah, this is you. And so I was like, man. So the first thing when I was walking away from there, cuffed up, chained up, walking away from there, I was like, man, what in the world is going on? 17 years. 17 years I spent in prison on this charge here.
It starts with investigation. You have to go out there and read everything that was done in that trial, every transcript, look at every exhibit. Then you got to go back and do it all over again. You got to talk to the witnesses. You have to look at the location. My students had to go out there and find this place. And then they had to talk to the gang members who run this place and the pimp who runs this place. We had to interview this guy on his front doorstep, which is basically in a drive-by area, and spend a lot of time because he was the key eyewitness.
So to be able to get him comfortable with me and for him not to feel threatened as I tried to pry information out of him was a challenge.
Because we thought he had lied. And it probably took a half a dozen interviews before he admitted that what had really happened is that the detective had pointed at what picture she wanted him to identify.
During the evidentiary hearing, the prosecutor continued to say that the shot came from the ground. Now the prosecutor, I would say, is probably 6'2", and he said that Mr. Anthony shot the decedent by walking up to him, and he said all he had to do was hold his hand up and shoot down like that.
Because of the residue that was not left in the wound, it had to have been at least 18 inches away. So if we give it that simple scenario, that's 18 inches, right, distance. We have to also keep in mind, which I did forget a few times in my calculations, that this is the entry of the bullet, which was in his body, so that was already 49.5 inches above the ground. But can we talk about 18 inches for 1 second? 18 inches is what, 1.5 feet? So you're standing this far apart from someone. Do you really think that someone is not going to be able to escape or know exactly what's happening? And how did Obie Anthony, let's say it was Obie Anthony, which we now know it's not, get this close to a person and then hold up a gun? You'd literally have to be positioning it at an actual 40-degree angle to be making the shot. It would be in his line of sight. So the further away you get, the higher the gun has to be above your head, because as the math shows, you start getting into the 7-foot range. This guy was not 7 feet tall. I believe he was 5'7", 5'8", somewhere in that range. You can't even reach that high. I'm 5'7.5". So I would have to literally be going like this, and why would anyone shoot like that?
It's so hard to get a hearing. It was like winning the lottery. And I realized the time had come. I had to meet Obie, and I really didn't want to do this because that's way too much responsibility. You meet somebody and you realize whether he spends the rest of his life behind bars is up to us.
I was looking at life without the possibility of parole. So it's like, man, that's one. It's almost like having a barrel full of fish and you grabbing them, but they slipping out of your hands. So when you finally grab one, it's like, yes, I got it.
Most judges will not want to grant these because it meant that one of their colleagues got it wrong and that it'll have to be cleaned up and we have to admit mistakes. This is a courageous judge.
When the judge said that he was going to release him was the best moment.
During our hearing, the DA stood behind Obie and said to this man, "Is this the guy who shot you?" My heart stopped beating because I had no idea. Nobody had ever asked Luis to make that identification. And Luis looks at Obie and takes entirely too long, in my opinion, but looks at him carefully and says, "No, that's not the guy."
To get someone that was wrongfully convicted and had served so many years an opportunity to make something of himself was the best feeling I've had in the 15 years I've been doing this.
You know, I was a more emotional creature. I was act first, then think later. And now I know that, you know, it's totally the other way around, totally the other way around.
I've learned life's great lessons. You know, I knew a lot about the law. It's my job, I'm a nerdy law professor. But I learned a lot about life and our courts. Despite people trying really hard to do the right thing, I think most people do, we make mistakes. We make terrible mistakes that affect people's lives. And it's not like television. I worry a lot because the public learns about the court system from television. But these are flesh and blood. These are people's lives. So what I've learned is that it matters. It matters that we do it right.
It just made me more committed to do what I do at a high level, to make sure that I turn over every rock and investigate every lead that's out there for my clients.
Right about now, Anthony's at a Roscoe's having dinner, and he's very much looking forward to having a really good night's sleep in a comfy hotel room.